People don't break when they fail. They break when the thing they used to stand on disappears. You can survive pain. You can survive loss. But when your job, your status, your routine, your identity collapse at the same time, most people freeze. This video is not here to motivate you. It's here to give you something far more dangerous. An internal system that still works when no one is cheering, when nothing makes sense, and when there's nothing left to lean on but yourself. The 4 principles you're about to hear are just the surface. What really matters is the framework underneath them. Japan 1645. Miyamoto Musashi was 62 years old, and he knew he was running out of time. Not old in the way people say it casually. Old in the way your bones start telling the truth. Old in the way you can feel the end coming, even if you don't speak it out loud. He had won more duels than most men could count. He had survived things that should have killed him. And when the world finally started to quiet down, he didn't go back to a home. He didn't gather students. He didn't surround himself with people who would soften the fear. He walked into a cave. No audience, no family, no applause, no one waiting for his last words like a movie scene. Just stone, cold air, and silence that doesn't comfort you, silence that exposes you. Because that's the detail most people misunderstand. The cave wasn't a healing retreat. It wasn't self-care. 8. It was a place where you can't run, you can't distract yourself, you can't perform, you can't keep your identity alive by having someone else look at it. And in that place, when everything external had been stripped away, Musashi wrote the principles that would outlive him. Not a manual for winning fights. A manual for surviving the moment your life collapses and you realize you don't know what you are without the things you depended on. That's what people miss. They hear samurai. They think it's about violence. But what Musashi was really doing was this. He was building an internal framework strong enough to hold him when nothing outside could. Because the hardest moment isn't when you're bleeding. The hardest moment is when you're alone with your own mind, and there's nowhere to put the noise. Most people can tolerate pain. Most people can tolerate working hard. But the modern world has a different weakness. It's not that people can't suffer. It's that people can't be still. Look around. The second there's nothing happening, people reach for their phone. Not because they need to, because silence feels like a threat. And it's not the silence itself that hurts. It's what the silence asks. If no one is watching, who are you? If no one is praising you, do you still move? If no one is validating you, do you still believe your life matters? That's why so many people aren't actually afraid of being alone. They're afraid of being unseen. They're afraid of the moment the world stops reflecting them back to themselves. Musashi wasn't lonely in that cave. Lonely is when you want connection and you don't have it. What he had was something else. He had solitude. Solitude is when you remove the world on purpose, to see what's left, and what's left is either strong or it collapses. This is the axis the entire story turns on. Alone is not the same as lonely, and the modern disease isn't loneliness. It's dependence. Dependence on noise. Dependence on approval. Dependence on the invisible permission slip you wait for before you allow yourself to keep going. Musashi wrote his principles in a place where there was no permission coming. No one was going to save him. No one was going to cheer. No one was going to remind him who he was. And that's exactly why it mattered. Because when you build something that can stand inside silence, you don't just survive, you become unshakable. And in a second, I'm going to pull you out of 1645 and drop you into a world you recognize. A kitchen table, a glowing screen, a modern collapse. Because the cave didn't disappear. It just changed shape. And most people are already inside it. They just don't know it yet. San Francisco, 2019. Not a battlefield. Not a cave. Just a kitchen. A laptop. A calendar full of meetings that made you feel important. A job title that sounded like you had your life together. Marcus was 31. Product manager at a startup that finally felt like it was about to win. 3 years of late nights. Slack messages at midnight. The kind of work that takes over your brain even when you're off the clock. And then the world tilted. The pandemic hit. The company panicked. And in March 2020, they cut 40% of the team. Marcus was on the list. Now, if you've ever been through something like this, you already know the first lie people tell you. They say, "It's okay, it's just a job." And yes, on paper, that sounds comforting. But the collapse doesn't happen because you lost a paycheck. The collapse happens when your name and your role were glued together, because the moment the title disappears, a question steps in, and it doesn't ask politely. It asks like a blade, if I'm not this, then what am I? Marcus didn't just lose income. He lost his mirror. He lost the thing that told him every day, you matter, you're useful, you're progressing, you're someone. And when that mirror shattered, he didn't know where to look. So he did what most people do. He tried to rebuild the mirror first. He opened his laptop and started sending out resumes, not one or two, dozens. He rewrote bullet points. He polished achievements. He curated his LinkedIn like a museum exhibit. And he told himself the same thing you probably tell yourself. I just need the right opportunity, the perfect role, the ideal salary, the right company. It sounds ambitious, but it's not ambition. It's paralysis dressed up as standards. Because perfect gives you a reason not to move. If the job isn't perfect, you wait. If the timing isn't perfect, you wait. If you don't feel confident yet, you wait. And waiting feels safer than risking rejection. So Marcus waited. Weeks passed. No responses, or worse, generic responses. Thank you for your application. Translation: you're invisible. And the more invisible he felt, the more he tightened his grip on the only thing he still believed in: competence. He told himself, I have skills. He wasn't wrong. He knew how to pitch. He knew how to lead a product team. He knew how to talk to investors. He knew how to build roadmaps and timelines and strategy decks. But none of that answered the real problem. Because the crisis wasn't outside him, it was inside. When pressure came, his mind didn't hold. He started making bad decisions. He would apply impulsively, then regret it. He would overthink one email for an hour, then send nothing. He would refresh inboxes like it was a slot machine. And the darkest part is this: he didn't just want a job. He wanted validation. He wanted someone out there to confirm, you're still worth something. That's what people don't admit. They don't miss the work. They miss the identity. And when the identity is gone, you don't feel unemployed. You feel erased. Rebecca, his girlfriend, tried to be supportive in the beginning. She said the right things. She gave him time. She encouraged him to keep going. But Marcus wasn't moving. He was stuck in that invisible cage where you're doing something every day, but nothing is actually changing. And the longer it went on, the smaller he became. Because when you build your whole sense of self around a single role, you don't just lose that role, you lose your coordinates. This is the part most people never name, but it destroys them. It's called identity foreclosure. It's when your value gets locked inside one label. Job title, relationship status, being the smart one, being the reliable one, being the successful one. And as long as the label is intact, you feel stable. But the moment it breaks, you don't just feel sad. You feel like you don't exist. That's why Marcus didn't bounce back. Not because he was lazy, not because he lacked talent, because he didn't know who to be next. Society trains you for this trap. It teaches you how to build a resume, how to build a brand, how to build a career ladder, but it doesn't teach you how to build an internal identity that survives loss. So when the external structure collapses, you freeze. And that freeze looks like depression, but underneath it is something even simpler. No map, no internal reference point, no why that stays standing when the job disappears. Marcus was sitting in that kitchen, staring at the same screen every day, watching the same hours pass, telling himself he was trying, while secretly feeling something he couldn't say out loud. I don't know how to move without being someone first. And that's the real collapse. Not unemployment, not rejection. The moment you realize your entire life was being held up by a single pillar and it just snapped. And if you've ever felt that, if you've ever felt your confidence evaporate the moment a title, a relationship, a reputation, or a plan disappeared, then you already understand what comes next. Because when you don't have an internal framework, you don't rebuild. You beg, you chase, you numb, or you try the obvious thing. You try motivation. And it works. For 3 days. So Marcus did what the modern world tells you to do when you're collapsing. He tried motivation, not the quiet kind, not the take a walk and clear your head kind. He went straight for the hard, aggressive, cinematic version, the version that looks good on Instagram. He started watching those videos, guys yelling into the camera like they're trying to save your life by shouting at it. Wake up at 5 a.m. Cold shower, gym, grind. No excuses. And Marcus bought it. Completely. Because when you're in pain, you don't want a system. You want a surge. You want something to hit you like electricity and turn you back on. So he did the whole ritual. Day 1, 5 a.m. Alarm. He sat up like he'd been drafted into war. Cold shower. He hated every second of it. But he told himself that was the point. Push-ups, protein. Laptop open by sunrise. He sent resumes. He planned. He wrote lists. He felt powerful. Day 2, same thing. Day 3, same thing. And for 3 days, he was convinced it was working. Because motivation is loud. It feels like progress even when nothing has changed yet. It feels like you've become a different person. But then day 4 came. And day 4 didn't come with a warning. It didn't come with a dramatic scene. It came like real life comes. Quiet, ordinary, heavy. Marcus opened his eyes and it was 11 a.m. The room was hot. His phone was face down on the bed. His chest felt tight. And the first thought wasn't, "I'm tired." The first thought was, "You failed again." The good nut for. He didn't take the shower. He didn't work out. He didn't open the laptop. He just lay there, staring at the ceiling, feeling the shame spread. And this is the part nobody in those motivation videos talks about. When you break the streak, you don't just lose the habit. You lose trust in yourself. Because the voice in your head doesn't say, "You missed a day." It says, "This is who you are. You can't commit. You always fall apart. You're built wrong." The tension the rights. And Marcus hated himself more on day 4 than he ever did on day 1. Because day 1 gave him hope. Day 4 proved to him that hope was a lie. That's why motivation is dangerous when you're rebuilding from zero. It doesn't just burn out. It burns you. It turns your own failure into evidence. And now Marcus wasn't just unemployed, he was ashamed. So he did what you do when you're ashamed. He tried to fix the shame with more motivation. He watched more videos. He promised himself a stronger comeback. He set a harsher alarm. He wrote a new plan. And it worked. For 3 days. Again. And then day 4 came. Again. And each cycle didn't make him tougher. It made him smaller. Because every time you rely on a spike of emotion to change your life, you train your brain to believe one thing. I can only move when I feel a certain way. And when you don't feel that way, you freeze. Here's the brutal truth. Most self-help doesn't fail because the ideas are wrong. Kaizen, discipline, consistency, purpose, self-reliance, all of it is true. The reason it fails is because you're trying to apply a true principle with the wrong mechanism. You're trying to smash a biological system with willpower, and willpower always loses to biology. Your brain is not designed to celebrate change. It's designed to protect what's familiar. It doesn't care if the familiar is miserable. Familiar feels safe. So when you attempt a massive transformation overnight, new schedule, new body, new life, your brain reads it like a threat, not a threat to your comfort, a threat to your identity. And when identity is threatened, the brain doesn't debate. It defends. It creates resistance. It creates procrastination. It creates tomorrow. It creates excuses that sound logical enough to believe. That's why you can watch a video, feel inspired, swear you're changing, and then 2 days later you're back on the couch with your phone in your hand wondering what happened. Nothing happened. You just tried to force a leap your nervous system couldn't tolerate. Motivation is cheap fuel. It burns hot, burns fast, and then leaves you in the dark, emptier than before. Marcus didn't need more fire. He needed a structure. He needed a way to rebuild that didn't require him to become superhuman for a week. Because if the method only works when you feel strong, then it doesn't work. And that's exactly where his story changes. Not with a breakthrough, with something small, something almost insulting. A move so tiny his brain wouldn't even recognize it as change. That's the only kind of change that survives. Before Musashi became a legend, he almost died for the exact same reason Marcus collapsed. Early Musashi won because he was wild, because he was fearless, because he hit harder, moved faster, intimidated his opponents before they even understood what was happening. At 13, he killed a grown man with a piece of wood. At 16, he defeated multiple trained swordsmen in a single encounter. From the outside, it looked like talent. From the inside, it was recklessness disguised as strength, and for a while, that recklessness worked. That's the dangerous part. When brute force works early, it convinces you that force is enough. Musashi began to believe that courage could replace structure, that aggression could replace mastery, that if he just pushed harder, everything would bend. But then he started facing real masters. Men who didn't panic. Men who didn't rush. Men who had survived long enough to understand timing, distance, and restraint. And Musashi still won, but barely. Each duel ended with him breathing harder, injured, closer to death. He wasn't dominating. He was surviving. And survival is not a strategy. At one point, Musashi realized something terrifying. If he kept fighting this way, he would eventually meet someone his fearlessness couldn't overwhelm. And that fight would end his life. So he stopped chasing big leaps. He stopped trying to improve everything at once. He stopped relying on bursts of intensity. Instead, he did something that looked almost embarrassing compared to the other warriors. He picked one thing. One movement, one angle, one mistake. And he worked on that, again, and again, and again. Not for days, for weeks, sometimes months. This wasn't about doing less. It was about doing so little that resistance never appeared. That's what Kaizen really is. Not small improvement as a motivational slogan, but change that's so small it never triggers internal opposition. Big change feels heroic, but big change sets off alarms. Your brain doesn't ask, is this good for me? It asks, is this familiar? And when it's not familiar, it fights back. That's why dramatic plans feel exciting and then collapse. That's why motivation spikes and disappears. That's why you swear you're changing, and then don't. Kaizen is the long way around that fight. It doesn't challenge your identity. It doesn't demand courage. It doesn't require belief. It just moves, quietly, relentlessly. Marcus didn't understand this at first. When he read about Kaizen, his reaction wasn't inspiration. It was frustration. 2 minutes a day? That sounded insulting. He needed a job. He needed money. He needed proof that he wasn't broken. 2 minutes felt like pretending. But desperation makes you try things you'd normally dismiss. So he made a rule. Not a goal, a rule. Every day, he would open LinkedIn for 2 minutes. That's it. Not apply. Not optimize. Not fix his life. Just open it. The first few days felt pointless. He stared at the screen, closed it. Done. But something strange happened. Nothing resisted. There was no dread. No internal argument. No voice saying, "What's the point?" Because the action was too small to be threatening. After a week, he started reading one job posting. Not applying. Just reading. After another week, he adjusted one line on his profile. One word. One comma. And that's when the shift happened. Not externally. Internally. The act stopped feeling heavy. His brain stopped treating it as danger. And once resistance disappeared, movement became natural. On day 24, Marcus sent an application. Not because he forced himself, but because it felt like the obvious next step. That's the power of Kaizen. It doesn't push you forward. It removes what's holding you back. Musashi used this same principle with the sword. While others trained 10 techniques poorly, he refined one movement endlessly. Timing, distance, posture, 1% at a time. And over years, that gap became unbridgeable. Not because he was gifted, but because he never stopped moving. Even near the end of his life, he practiced basic cuts, not to learn something new, but to make something old slightly better. Marcus applied this everywhere. 10 push-ups a day, 1 drawer cleaned, 1 expense reviewed. Nothing impressive, nothing worth posting, but never zero. And that's the rule. Kaizen doesn't ask you to be heroic, it asks you to be consistent. It doesn't care how small the step is, it only cares that the step exists. Because once you accept zero as an option, zero becomes a habit. But when zero is no longer allowed, progress becomes inevitable. You don't rebuild your life by jumping. You rebuild it by refusing to stop walking. Even when the steps are microscopic, especially then, never aim for big. Aim for non-zero. And never break that rule. Kaizen gave Marcus movement again. Not confidence. Not joy. Movement. And at first, that felt like winning. Because when you've been stuck for months, even a tiny step feels like oxygen. 2 minutes a day became 10. 10 became an hour. His profile got cleaner. His inbox got busier. Recruiters started replying again. And then the interviews came. 1 call. 2 calls. 5. Marcus put on the same "I'm fine" voice he used before the collapse. He smiled at the right moments. He told the story the way companies like it, the polished version where pain becomes a growth season. And he got far. Final rounds. Second interviews. More. "We love your experience." More. "You're a strong candidate." From the outside, it looked like a comeback, but inside, something felt dead. Not sad, worse, numb. He would hang up after a call and just sit there, staring at the wall like he was watching someone else's life happen on a screen. Because he wasn't moving toward a life, he was moving toward proof. Proof that he still mattered, proof that he was still employable, proof that the collapse didn't define him. And you can run a long distance on proof. You can run for years, but it never feels like living. That's the trap no one warns you about. You can improve your habits, you can rebuild your discipline, you can get your momentum back, and still be walking in the wrong direction. Fast, clean, efficient, wrong. Musashi knew this better than anyone, because before the cave, before the 21 lines, before the mythology, he had already won. A lot. Duel after duel, victory after victory. People whispered his name like it was a curse. But there's a detail most people don't talk about. Winning didn't make him whole. Winning made him hungry. It made him addicted. Because when your purpose is just be the best, there's no finish line. There's only the next opponent, and the next, and the next. And if you're honest, you know this feeling. You hit a goal and you feel nothing. You get the thing you wanted, and it lasts 10 minutes. You level up, and immediately need a bigger level. Not because you're ungrateful, because you're directionless. Musashi eventually realized that mastery without meaning turns into a cage. You become great at something, but you don't know why you're doing it anymore. And if you don't have a why, even success feels like slow death. That's where Ikigai enters. And listen, Ikigai is not the cute version you see online, not the follow your passion poster, not the fantasy that you'll wake up every morning smiling. Ikigai is a compass. It's what prevents your progress from becoming a treadmill, because there's a difference between being productive and being alive. Marcus didn't need more applications. He didn't need more networking. He didn't need another productivity hack. He needed a direction that didn't collapse the moment the job title disappeared. So he did something simple, but brutal. He stopped asking, "What job can I get?" and started asking 4 questions, not in his head, on paper, because your brain will lie when it's scared. Question 1. What do you actually enjoy doing when no one is watching? Not what looks impressive, not what gets likes, what pulls you in, even in silence. Question 2. What are you good at without forcing it? Not what you could be good at someday. What you can already do, right now, reliably. Question 3. What does the world actually need that you can contribute to? Not what the world applauds. What solves a real problem? What helps a real person? And question 4. What can you get paid for? Because purpose without survival becomes a hobby. And survival matters. At first, Marcus hated these questions, because they didn't give him a quick answer. They didn't give him a job posting to click. They forced him to face something deeper, that he'd been chasing successful more than right. But the more he wrote, the clearer it became. He didn't just like building products. He liked translating chaos into clarity. He liked taking messy ideas and shaping them into something people could actually use. He liked the moment when a confused team suddenly aligned because the story made sense. And he realized something else. He didn't want to work anywhere that only valued him as a badge. He wanted to work where his skills served something real. So he changed his approach. He stopped applying to everything. He started applying to places that matched his intersection. Less volume, more alignment. And something shifted again. The interviews felt different. He wasn't performing anymore. He was choosing. He wasn't begging to be picked. He was testing fit. And for the first time since the collapse, Marcus didn't feel like he was sprinting away from shame. He felt like he was walking toward a life. That's Ikigai. Not passion. Not happiness. A point where your movement actually means something. Because if you don't find that point, you won't crash from failure. You'll rot from success, quietly, productively, and you won't even notice it happening until years are gone. Ikigai is the intersection that stops that slow death. It's the reason you wake up not to chase status, but to build a life that still feels like yours when the applause disappears. Marcus didn't collapse again because he lost momentum. He collapsed because he found direction and still couldn't move. That's the part nobody tells you. You can finally know what you want. You can finally see the path clearly, and still spend 4 hours rewriting one sentence. Marcus would open his laptop with a plan. One simple plan. Post a short thread about what he'd learned. Launch a tiny course. Send one email. Ship one imperfect thing. And then his brain would do what it always does when it senses danger. It would start polishing. Not improving, polishing. He'd write a tweet, delete it, rewrite it, delete it, change one word, then another, move a comma like it could save his life. At 10 p.m., he'd look up and realize he hadn't created anything. He had just been hiding. And the most brutal part? From the outside, it looked like discipline. It looked like standards. It looked like, I care about quality. But if you were inside Marcus's head, you'd hear the truth. If I post this, they'll see I'm not that smart. If I launch this, they'll realize I don't belong. If I try and it flops, it will confirm what I've secretly feared since the layoff. Everyone. Perfectionism isn't a high standard. It's a defense system. It's the brain's way of saying, if we never finish, we never get judged. So Marcus delayed. He told himself he was being strategic. He told himself, I'm just refining. I'm just preparing. I'm just waiting for the right moment. But weeks turned into months, and the more he delayed, the heavier his chest felt. Because deep down, he knew what was happening. He wasn't stuck because he lacked talent. He was stuck because he was trying to survive shame. This is where Kojiro comes back into the story. Sasaki Kojiro was the picture of perfection. A swordsman so precise people said his blade moved like geometry. Every step measured. Every strike calculated. Nothing wasted. And that's exactly why he was dangerous. But it's also why he was fragile. Because perfection is incredible until life refuses to follow your script. Musashi didn't defeat Kojiro by being cleaner. He defeated him by becoming unpredictable, by forcing a situation Kojiro couldn't control. And Kojiro froze, not because he wasn't skilled, because his entire identity depended on the world behaving correctly. He needed the duel to be proper. He needed the timing to be right. He needed the variables to stay within the range he could dominate. And when they didn't, his perfection became a prison. Marcus was doing the same thing, not with a sword, with his life. He was waiting for a version of himself that could not be criticized, a version of himself that could not be rejected, a version of himself that could not bleed. But there is no such version. That's the lie perfectionism sells you, and it costs you your entire future. One night, Marcus hit a wall. He had rewritten a single tweet for so long that his eyes burned. He stared at the screen and felt something ugly rise up. Not sadness, disgust. Disgust at himself, because he finally saw it clearly. He wasn't protecting his work. He was protecting his ego. He was trying to make his output so perfect that it would guarantee love. But love doesn't work like that, and neither does respect. So he did something that terrified him. He posted the truth, not the polished version, not the heroic arc, not the I'm back on top narrative. He posted a thread titled something like, here's what I did after I got laid off, and how I failed. Zylia send. And then he wrote it out. The mornings he couldn't get out of bed. The resumes he sent that got ignored. The interviews he bombed. The days he watched motivational videos like medication and still felt empty. He didn't try to make it inspirational. He didn't try to end it with a perfect lesson. He just told the truth in a voice that sounded like a human being. And when he hit post, his stomach dropped. Because now there was no hiding. Now people could see the crack. Now the mask was off. For 10 minutes, nothing happened. Marcus refreshed the page like a man checking for his own execution. And then the comments came. Not hate. Recognition. Me too. I thought I was the only one. This is exactly where I am right now. Thank you for saying what I can't say out loud. Someone replied. I don't trust perfect advice. I trust scars. And Marcus just sat there, staring at the screen. Because that was the twist. The thing he had been running from exposure was the exact thing that created connection. This is Wabi-Sabi. Not as an aesthetic. Not as broken pottery looks pretty. Wabi-Sabi is the acceptance that life is cracked. That humans are unfinished. That progress is not clean. And the crack is not a flaw you need to hide. It's the place where reality enters. When Marcus tried to be perfect, he got silence. When he showed the fracture, he got 1,000 hands reaching back. Because people don't connect to manufactured perfection. They connect to realness. They connect to the crack that tells them, you're not alone in this. And that's what most perfectionists don't understand. Your perfection doesn't make you respected. It makes you distant. It makes you untouchable. And in a world where everyone is quietly drowning, nobody wants another untouchable person telling them how to swim. They want someone who admits they swallowed water too. Wabi-Sabi is not lowering your standards. It's lowering your armor. It's choosing to ship the imperfect thing. To speak before you feel ready. To move while you still look unfinished. Because the truth is simple. You are not stuck because you can't do it. You are stuck because you're trying to do it without being seen. And the moment you stop needing to be flawless, you finally become free enough to move. By the time Marcus understood Kaizen, Ikigai, and Wabi-Sabi, he was finally moving again. Not fast, but forward. He was shipping imperfect work. He was building momentum that didn't depend on a good mood. He was starting to feel something he hadn't felt since the layoff: control. And that's when the last chain revealed itself. Because even when your habits improve, even when your purpose sharpens, even when you stop trying to be perfect, you can still be owned, not by failure, by other people's eyes. This is the part most people get wrong about loneliness. They think loneliness is what kills you. It isn't. What kills you is the inability to walk alone, to take one step without needing someone to clap, to make one decision without asking the crowd for permission, to sit in silence without reaching for a screen like a lifeline. Marcus was improving, but he still had a wire plugged into the outside world, and the wire was thin, but it was strong enough to control him. He'd finish a solid day of work, close his laptop, and feel proud for about 8 seconds. Then his hand would drift to his phone, not because he needed information, because he needed confirmation. He'd check the thread he posted, refresh, check again. He'd open Instagram without thinking, scroll for 2 minutes, then 10, then 30. Not because the content was good, because the noise was comforting. And in the quiet moments, the old habits returned. He'd check his ex's profile, just once, just to see. He'd compare his life to someone else's highlight reel, and suddenly his progress felt pathetic. He'd read one comment that didn't even matter, and it would punch a hole through his entire day. And if you've ever felt that, you know exactly what it is. It's not being weak. It's not being sensitive. It's dependence. A hidden dependence that looks normal because everyone has it. But dependence is still dependence. Musashi had a word for this that he never used in modern terms, but lived in his bones. Self-effort, self-sufficiency, not arrogance, freedom. Because Musashi didn't go into that cave to heal. He went there so he couldn't run anymore. No disciples to impress, no audience to perform for, no family waiting to make his last words meaningful. Just him and silence. And people romanticize that. They picture peace. But real solitude isn't peaceful at first. It's revealing. This is the truth. Most people don't fear being alone. They fear silence. Not because silence hurts, but because silence asks a question you can't scroll away from. If nobody is watching, who am I? In the noise, you can pretend. In the noise, you can stay busy. In the noise, you can keep moving without ever looking at your own life. But the moment it gets quiet, everything you've been avoiding starts speaking. That's why so many people can tolerate pain. They can tolerate pressure. They can tolerate rejection. They can tolerate long hours. But they can't tolerate 5 minutes alone with their own thoughts. So they medicate. Not with pills, with pings, notifications, messages, feeds, constant input. The modern world doesn't just distract you, it anesthetizes you. And the scariest part is you don't even notice it happening. You think you're checking something real quick, if a designot, but what you're really doing is escaping the void. Escaping the moment where you'd have to admit, I don't know what I'm doing. I don't know what I believe. I don't know if I'm proud of my life when nobody is there to validate it. Social media didn't invent this weakness. It just weaponized it. Because the more you check, the more you depend. And the more you depend, the less you can move without permission. That's why validation is so addictive. Every like is a tiny stamp that says, you exist. Every reply is a small hit of, you matter. And without it, some people feel like they disappear. Marcus realized this the hard way. He wasn't just rebuilding his career, he was rebuilding his nervous system. So he tried something that sounded simple, but felt like war. He started cutting the need to be seen. Not cutting people, cutting the dependency. He deleted apps from his home screen. He stopped checking stats for a week. He set a rule. No phone for the first hour of the morning, and the first few days were brutal. He didn't feel peaceful. He felt exposed. He'd sit at his desk and his brain would scream for noise. Check something. See what they said. Make sure you're not falling behind. And he would just not do it. He would let the urge burn itself out. That's what walking alone really is. Not hiking in the mountains. Not turning into some cold monk. It's sitting in the discomfort of not being witnessed and still continuing. It's training yourself to move without applause. Because here's the paradox. Only the person who can be alone can choose connection freely. Everyone else is connecting out of hunger, out of fear, out of the terror of being left with themselves. Musashi didn't become strong because he had no loneliness. He became strong because he could carry it. And Marcus finally understood. The path of walking alone isn't isolation. It's autonomy. It's the ability to take the next step when nobody claps, nobody texts back, nobody approves, nobody understands. And once you have that, you don't just stop fearing solitude, you stop being controlled by the world. Because the moment you stop needing to be seen, you become impossible to stop. And this is the part people miss. They hear Kaizen. They hear Ikigai. They hear Wabi-Sabi. Oh, they hear walk alone. And they treat them like quotes, like vibes, like something you put on a wallpaper. But Musashi didn't survive 4 centuries as a legend because he collected good ideas. He survived because he built a system, 4 gears. And if one gear slips, the whole machine breaks at the exact point you're weakest. That's why so many people feel like they're doing everything right and still don't move. Because they're not missing motivation, they're missing a gear. Think of Kaizen as the engine that turns every day. It's the smallest action you can repeat without resistance. 2 minutes, 1 line, 1 rep, 1 page. But Kaizen without Ikigai is just motion. It's running on a treadmill in a burning house. You wake up early, you grind, you build habits, and you still feel empty. Because you're improving in a direction that doesn't matter to you. That's how you get people who look disciplined on the outside and feel dead on the inside. Kaizen without Ikigai becomes a loop. Progress with no meaning. Now flip it. Ikigai without Wabi-Sabi is clarity with no courage. You finally know what you want. You finally see the path. You finally feel purpose. And then you freeze, because now it matters. And when something matters, perfectionism appears like a bodyguard. It tells you, not yet, not ready, not good enough, fix it one more time. So you don't launch. You don't post. You don't apply. You don't start. Ikigai without Wabi-Sabi becomes a beautiful plan that never touches reality. It's direction, trapped behind fear of being judged, and Wabi-Sabi without Kaizen is the most dangerous one of all, because it disguises itself as wisdom. You tell yourself, it's okay to be imperfect. And that's true, but without daily movement, acceptance turns into stagnation. It turns into, this is just who I am. It turns into emotional permission to stay stuck. You become peaceful, but you don't become free. Wabi-Sabi without Kaizen becomes comfort with no change. And then there's the last gear, walking alone, the ability to move without applause, to keep going when nobody sees you. But walking alone without the other 3? That's not strength, that's just isolation. That's you, sitting in silence, with no habits, no purpose, and no action. That's loneliness wearing a mask, because solitude only becomes power when you have something to build in that solitude. So the question isn't, which principle is best? The question is, which gear is missing in you? Because missing gears create predictable failures. If you keep starting and quitting, you don't need a new personality. You're missing Kaizen. Your system has no daily engine. If you're consistent, but empty, you're missing Ikigai. Your system has motion but no meaning. If you know what you want, but never ship, you're missing Wabi-Sabi. Your system has direction but no tolerance for imperfection. And if you're doing all 3, but you still keep looking around, still checking the crowd, still needing someone to confirm you're allowed to exist, you're missing the ability to walk alone. You're still plugged into validation. And here's the brutal part. Most people don't fail because they lack discipline. They fail because they negotiate with it. Every single day. Today I'm tired. Tomorrow. Today I'm stressed. Next week. Today I'm not feeling it. Later. The problem isn't the missed day. The problem is the message you send your brain. This rule is optional. Once a rule becomes optional, your mind will bargain with it forever. Musashi didn't become unbreakable because he had superhuman willpower. He became unbreakable because he built non-negotiables, not extreme rules. Unbreakable minimums, not 2 hours in the gym, in the sander. Just never 0. Not write a perfect chapter, just touch the work every day. Not be fearless, just move even while afraid. That's the difference between discipline that breaks and discipline that lasts. Discipline that lasts doesn't feel heroic. It feels boring. It feels small. It feels almost insulting. And that's exactly why it works. Because it doesn't give your brain anything to argue with. So when you look at these 4 principles, don't see them as 4 separate lessons. See them as a machine. Kaizen turns the gear. Ikigai aims the gear. Wabi-Sabi keeps the gear moving under pressure. And walking alone protects the gear from the crowd. And once the gears lock together, you stop relying on motivation. Because you finally have what Marcus didn't have when everything collapsed. A system that holds you up. Exactly when your emotions won't. So here's the part where this stops being philosophy. Because understanding this changes nothing if you don't act. Musashi didn't rebuild himself with inspiration. Marcus didn't escape paralysis with clarity alone. They used a system you don't negotiate with. 4 steps. No explosions. No reinvention. No waiting to feel ready. Just rules. Step 1. Pick one place where you are stuck. Not your whole life. Not your identity. Not your future. One zone. Your body. Your work. Your money. Your skill. Your mind. If you choose 5, you'll change none. Choose 1. Lock it. This is where the system lives. Step 2. Define the smallest action that cannot trigger resistance. Not what sounds impressive. Not what you should do. What you will not argue with. 2 minutes. 1 paragraph. 1 rep. 1 message drafted but not sent. If your brain negotiates, it's too big. You are not trying to grow fast. You are trying to never hit 0. Because 0 is where identity collapses. Never 0. Step 3. Force purpose into the action. Answer 4 questions honestly, without romance. Do you enjoy this even when it's boring? Are you competent enough to improve? Does it solve a real problem for someone else? Could this eventually sustain you? If one answer is missing, adjust the direction. Not later. Now. Purpose is not passion. It's alignment. It's how you avoid running fast in the wrong direction for 10 years. Step 4. Ship the ugly version. Post the imperfect draft. Apply with the incomplete resume. Release the version that makes you uncomfortable. Perfectionism is not standards. It's fear of being seen. And nothing grows in hiding. People do not connect with polished armor. They connect with cracks that are real. Now the final cut. Remove one dependency. One place where your movement depends on approval. Stop checking if they saw it. Stop refreshing for likes. Stop waiting for a reply before continuing. You don't need to disappear from people. You need to disappear from the need to be witnessed. That's the difference between solitude and freedom. Do this, and something strange happens. You stop asking how long it will take, because the system holds you. You stop asking if you're motivated, because the rules don't care. You stop asking who's watching, because the work moves without permission. This is how Musashi ended his life. Alone in a cave. No audience. No disciples. No applause. But completely free. Not because he had nothing, but because nothing controlled him anymore. And this is the choice in front of you. You can wait until life collapses hard enough to force change, or you can begin quietly. Today, one zone, one small action, one ugly version, one dependency cut. No negotiations, because the people who survive collapse don't rise dramatically. They rebuild invisibly. And when the world finally looks again, they're already standing.